A battered, bruised man lies completely motionless as he is dragged into a dense forest and left for dead. But this man isn't dead, he is playing dead, and he is about to wake up, walk out of these woods, and become the most notorious prankster in the history of Kerala folklore. This is Muttassu Namboodiri. As a young man, he traveled to the Mookambika Temple to complete a 40-day prayer ritual. He was obsessed with the Thrimadhuram, a sacred dessert made of jaggery, banana, and honey. It was left in the inner shrine at night for the gods, and tradition said that anyone who ate the leftovers would be granted an effortless, silver-tongued eloquence. One morning, Muttassu made his move. He slipped into the shrine just as the doors opened and swallowed a handful of the sweet. But the priest caught him before he could retreat. A lob of temple staff beat him until he collapsed. Thinking fast, Muttassu held his breath and went limp, convincing the crowd they had killed him. To avoid a scandal, the priests hauled his corpse into the deep woods and dumped it. Once the priests were gone, Muttassu stood up. He was covered in bruises, but as he began his journey home, he realized the dessert had taken effect. He no longer struggled for words. Instead, he had a reply ready for anyone who crossed his path. He started small, testing his new abilities on local scholars, specifically a very strict Sanskrit teacher. While the teacher was away, Muttassu sat with the students and taught them entirely incorrect, literal Malayalam translations for their classic verses, making the complex poetry sound ridiculous. When the teacher returned and demanded to know why the children were reciting nonsense, Muttassu launched into a rapid-fire defense. He used such convoluted, fake logic that the teacher eventually gave up, unable to find a flaw in the nonsense. He then moved on to higher-ranking targets, like the Variyar, a wealthy and incredibly proud temple administrator. The Variyar was used to total subservience. So, when Muttassu saw him preparing for a private oil bath, he simply sat down and began sharing the Variyar's expensive oils, as if they were old friends. While the Variyar was stunned into silence, Muttassu went to the kitchen and ate the man's private serving of milk pudding. When the Variyar finally confronted him, Muttassu cited a fictional medical text, claiming it was dangerous not to eat pudding after such a bath. Muttassu had found a way to navigate 19th century social hierarchies. If he could justify his actions through a religious text or a medical rule, no matter how fake, the elites were forced to let him have his way. He applied this same logic to the greedy. He once visited the home of a landlord famous for never offering travelers so much as a cup of water. Muttassu claimed it was the anniversary of his mother's passing and offered to pay for a ritual feast. The landlord, smelling a profit, prepared a massive meal with multiple courses. After eating until he could barely move, Muttassu stood up and mentioned he'd gotten the dates confused. It was actually his birthday. He washed his hands and walked out, leaving the miser with a clean kitchen and no way to charge for the ritual. He even targeted the vanity of the general public. At the Aithihyamala festival, it was common for people to borrow gold jewelry just to look wealthy in the crowd. Muttassu arrived carrying a heavy wooden box of property deeds on his head. He told the confused onlookers that since his wealth was in land rather than gold, this was the only way he could participate in the bragging. It was a literal demonstration of how heavy and burdensome their own vanity had become, making the gold-clad elites look foolish by comparison. Eventually, his reputation reached the capital, where he finally faced the highest authority in the land, the Maharaja of Travancore. The king was passing through the streets, and protocol required every subject to show their face to the royal procession. Muttassu took a cloth, climbed into a stone water trough by the roadside, and submerged his body, leaving only his face visible above the water as the king approached. The procession stopped. The Maharaja, looking down from his palanquin, demanded to know why this man was hiding in a trough. Muttassu replied that he was simply following orders. The decree said to show his face, and he argued that if he stood on the street, the king would be forced to look at his whole body, a clear violation of the royal command. The tension broke when the Maharaja began to laugh. Instead of punishing the impertinence, he ordered that Muttassu be given a reward. Muttassu spent the rest of his life in this unique state of immunity. He navigated a world of rigid social borders and high-stakes protocols by treating every authority figure like a straight man in his own personal comedy routine. He didn't just survive the 19th century. He made sure he was the only one who got the last word.